All right. Well, welcome everyone. I know that we still have some people who are entering the room, so we're going to do our introductions first, and then we're going to dive right into our program for the day. My name is Netta Neharai. I'm the CEO of HOA Organizers, and I wanted to introduce our panelists today. But before I do, I'm going to also introduce our co-hosts, Shauna Gatlin, who's one of our vice presidents at HOA Organizers, and Matt Metters, who is our chief operating officer. They are here to help us make sure that our event goes off without any glitches today. We have Demetrius Exanthos, who is the principal of Sachs Insurance. They work with 11 states throughout the country and are experts in homeowners association. So Demetrius, thank you for being here today and giving us all the updates on the insurance world and how things are moving. We have Russell Brown, who is the CEO of GB Group. They're a reconstruction company, and Russell is an expert in all things construction, restoration, and he will be sharing his perspectives with us today. And we have Maria Cow, who is a partner with, so tell me if I'm butchering the name, but it's Briscoe, Ivester, and Basil. Did I say it correctly?
Got it.
Yay. Okay. So she's a partner and offering a legal perspective for us today. The format of the day is that we have put together some various topics for you all that we've been asked. And we're going to be running through those with the panel. And at the end of our event, we have about an hour of us as a panel going through these topics. But please use the Q&A section for all of you who are joining us today. We are going to be holding those questions, and we're saving the last half an hour of today's webinar from 1 to 1:30 to go through as many questions as we can and address the panel with those questions. So we want to make sure that we take care of you. We know that we have some people here who have been impacted by the fires. I think we all have in some way, shape, or form. So we're all just, really just truly sorry for the experience that we've all gone through, that you all have gone through. And we're here to just offer as much help and support and provide as much information. So I'm going to dive right in, and I'm going to start by asking you all as a panel. I know some things have shifted and changed in the last couple of days, and some more resources have become available. So Russell, you were starting off by telling us some things, and then I know Demetrius, you had some things. So could you, Russell, share with our group here what you've recently learned from last night today?
Yeah, absolutely. And first and foremost, my most heartfelt condolences to everyone that's been impacted. It's an absolute tragedy. And, we put this together to try to bring some education, to try to get the information into the right hands so that you can be as effective with your time and your recovery as possible. Regarding the updates to building permits and the rebuild process, Gavin Newsom last night came out and issued an executive order removing a little bit of the red tape that we typically experience with pulling building permits. Typically, there's a lot of facets that go into pulling a building permit, but they removed two pretty key ones that are going to really help expedite the process for the rebuild process. The first one that they removed is the California Environmental Quality Act, which is CEQA, and they removed the California Coastal Act. This is going to be things that are related to environmental protection and air quality protection during the construction process. Given the nature of this tragedy and the massive loss, typically this is a pretty big bottleneck for Southern California, and they have issued an executive order removing that from the process. They also updated that if you are a total loss insurance filer, if you are going to build like in kind in your home, they have also issued a expedited track for that. You'll just need to declare that when you get down to the building permit that your intent is to build like in kind, and they have a target of processing those permits in about a week, which typically it's about 6 months. So lots of progress. We anticipate more regulation to be pulled as this unfolds. So some good news updates there.
That is good news. And Demetrius, I think you found a resource and a great website that you can share with us. I want to make sure.
Yes, I'm actually seeing if this is the screen. These are the states of emergency. It was there a minute ago. Let's see what happened to this guy.
I mean, FEMA's already getting bombarded. They've reported that they've already received 24,000 applications. And so I think this information is very timely.
Absolutely.
Oh, while you're
I
pulling
see.
it up, I did forget to mention for everybody who's here, we are recording this event today and we're going to have this up on our website. So if you want to reference this back, it will be available in a couple of days on our website. Or if you want to share it with anybody, it will be there and accessible for you. So
Got it.
all right.
All right. Sorry about that. So on Saturday, this site was launched by the state, www.ca.gov/LA fires. I'm going to briefly go through this. Real-time information, set up for alerts and safety tips, wildfire resources, apply for assistance. What I really like that they did is there is a link right here, disasterassistance.gov, to get your FEMA submission in. In addition, below, mobile device, right? I think that they thought about, hey, if you've lost everything, you may have lost your PCs and you might only have your mobile device on you. And the other tidbit, I think through the public news, they've been letting you know that all libraries are available for you to come in and use their computers if you don't have one. Additionally, there's a hotline directly to FEMA. There's some assistance videos, etc. I think the key, and you'll continue to hear this from the panel, we are going to retrace ground over and over again because we want you to understand that there is no harm at all in filing for FEMA assistance, and we'll cover that in greater detail. But this appears to be the quickest way to get, as they state, applying online is the easiest, fastest, and most convenient way to apply. And this link will be shared with all of you at the end of the presentation.
Thank you for that to both of you. So I'm going to start by just pitching a question to the panel. Let's just say you have a total loss, right? We have an association with a total loss or a portion that has burnt down. Demetrius, I'm going to start with you. What do you do? What are the first steps that we need to take here?
Right. So on the call, we have one of three types. We have a single family homeowner. We possibly have a condo owner that either lives in a high-rise, mid-rise, mixed-use building, or your typical traditional sprawling condo, or we have a board member, right? So from every one of those three perspectives, the first thing that you should do is if you have insurance, you should contact your agent, he or she, or if you have the policy number, contact the carrier directly and get that claim open. Secondarily, you want to apply for FEMA assistance. And again, like I said, we'll cover this again. The reason you want to do that is FEMA, its primary role is to fill any shortfalls or gaps that you might have in coverage. So as a quick example, everyone should have loss of use. This is money for you to go live somewhere else while your home is being reconstructed. A lot of times that is a mismanaged area of coverage. It's usually too low. And in this case, as we'll get into it, not to put Russell on the spot, but last night he discussed, it's highly plausible, even with all of these accelerated opportunities that are going to present themselves, it could be anywhere from $2,000 to 5 to 10 years in terms of total reconstruction, right? So it's highly likely you'll need money to live somewhere else for at least 18 to 24 months. So if you have a small amount in that bucket, you'll exhaust that with your primary carrier, and the hopes are that FEMA will then step in and take care of the rest. So think of FEMA as filling in the gaps for where you don't have coverage. And we'll get into that a little further. So I think the key thing I want to state is if you have insurance, file the claim, as well as jointly file a FEMA claim. And obviously, if you did not have insurance, file a claim.
Maria, what do you think we need to do from a legal perspective with a fire loss?
Well, the attorney is usually not who people think of as a first responder, but it is important to loop in your attorney for this type of incident because your governing documents are going to help you determine what your reconstruction obligations are, and there are also insurance provisions in there too. It'll talk about what the association's policy is supposed to cover, what the members' policy is supposed to cover. It might even provide for how the association may adjust for the different types of claims if there is a gap that FEMA left off. If there is a large destruction to the project and some associations have CC&Rs that say like, if you hit certain thresholds, you're going to have a membership election to vote on whether you even reconstruct. And that sounds like a crazy provision to put in there that anyone would vote not to reconstruct their home. But, again, it's in there. And so you do want to take a look at that. And if you're going to go to vote anyway, I think you put on the same ballot a vote on a special assessment if you guys need some immediate financial assistance to get you guys in the right track. And, even just doing that, you're going to talk to, Demetrios here for the insurance claims. You're going to talk to someone like Russell because you're going to want some kind of numbers around cost of repair. So this is going to be going on administratively in the background while you guys kind of figure out the physical predicament you guys are in after this type of destruction.
Thank you, Maria. That's very helpful. Russell, what can we do from a construction perspective, or what should we be looking at here?
To Demetrius's point, file the claim, file the claim, file the claim. Get the ball rolling on the insurance and coverage side immediately. There's going to be two different phases that are going to be happening almost simultaneously. But the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to see the city really try to get the infrastructure back in place from power, roads, sewage, water, things of that nature. And that will be happening simultaneously as they begin opening up the reconstruction of the homes. What we can expect to see and what you can do to help move this along is you want to be proactive. And there's going to be a lot of people reaching out to architects and designers to get a set of building plans to begin the reconstruction. I would encourage you to not just look in Southern California, but to look possibly in Northern California where resources might more be readily available. Additionally, be proactive in getting the quotes going. Get your contractors out to the site, get them vetted, get multiple bids on things, and then be proactive in terms of the cleanup. If you weren't total loss and you will be returning back to an evacuation zone, I would encourage you to get pressure washing level of inferno and loss. We're talking about temperatures, chemicals, and debris that are very toxic to the building materials themselves in the neighboring areas. If you are not proactive with getting the areas cleaned, it could decompose construction materials at an expedited rate. people that you could reach out to for pressure washing would be general contractors, painting contractors, landscape contractors, environmental contractors. I would get the ball rolling with that. The more that you can bring to the table by the time you engage the insurance adjuster, and Demetrios is going to talk about that in a little bit, but the more proactive you can be with gathering information and a plan, the faster it will go.
And, I just wanted to dovetail off of Russell because his microphone cut out a little bit. What he was also expressing is if you are a homeowner that was not directly impacted, but were close to the hot zone, you also want to potentially take a look at getting your home power washed and cleaned because of, we're not even sure what was in those homes or in those commercial buildings that burned up and released pollutants into the air. So whether you're on this call and you've been impacted, or you're on this call and you're a homeowner and you're concerned that at some day you might be and you want to learn more, either or, you want to take a look at possibly getting your home power washed and cleaned for the reasons Russell stated.
Thank you. Let's talk about smoke damage, soot. Are those things that if people were near the fire but didn't have a direct loss in that way, are those covered claims, and what should people be doing in those situations?
So obviously I don't know what carrier everyone has on this call. So I'm going to speak from what I'm going to state as a moderately confident position. If you had any brand name carrier, or even maybe you had a non-admitted carrier, there's a high likelihood that unless there was a specific exclusion to smoke damage and or soot debris, this should be covered. So again, the emphasis is on file a claim. Let an adjuster come out and let that adjuster determine, is there a cause of loss by a covered peril, and should there be a payout, right? And what you're going to hear over and over again is there is absolutely no downside to exploring if your coverage should come into play. All right.
Let's talk about homeowners insurance versus the HOA's insurance, and where each one will kick in and what the responsibility is on each side.
I'm going to work with Maria on this question as she's the attorney. So in the governing documents, there is an insurance section, and in that section, it calls out the insurable interests of the HOA, and it calls out the insurable interests of the unit owner. Now, from a single family community standpoint, predominantly the HOA is going to insure everything owned in common: clubhouse, pool, spa, tot lot, etc., sports courts. But those single family dwellings are going to be insured by the unit owner. In the condo, mid-rise, mixed use, high-rise setting, you're predominantly going to have the HOA insuring the structure or structures. And then, depending on the age of the governing documents, or if they've recently been rewritten, there should be a very explicit section and subsections as to what it is the HOA is primary and non-contributing to insure, as well as what the unit owner is responsible. And basically, that's going to break into three categories that most are familiar with. It's either going to be bare walls, which means that the onus is on the unit owner to insure everything inside the exclusive use airspace, picking up from flooring, cabinetry in. Another standard is what they call standard interior as built by the declarant. And that's a lot of the way they were written, and I'll let Maria speak to that. But typically, from an insurance standpoint, they're going to allocate a standard amount for flooring, cabinetry, wall coverings, utilities, etc., and then stop and require the unit owner to pick up improvements, betterments, and alterations. And then I haven't seen it a ton in LA, but I have seen it in San Francisco more than I like, where literally the governing documents dump the entire unit, even improvements, on the HOA to insure. Okay. And I highly encourage those boards to rewrite their governing documents as fast as they can. So, Maria, I'm going to turn it over to you from here.
Well, my introductory comments about the insurance section of the CCNRs is generally I want everyone to get it out of their head that this is fair or this is not fair. Because even outside the context of this fire situation that we're dealing with, I mean, we often do have to look at those insurance covenants and decide, okay, well, the association's insurance policy is primary or first up for this, or it falls into one of the three buckets that Demetrios described, which is, okay, let's say, for example, it is the more all-encompassing policy where it insures walls in. So the association's policy insures the entire project, including the unit interior. And sometimes you might hear things like, oh, well, but that's not fair. Like the association isn't responsible for unit interior stuff. Well, just think to yourself, the insurance covenants are different. What's insurable and what's covered is different than what the association is responsible for out of pocket. It's not the association's money, it's the insurance carrier's money, and the entire membership paid for that policy through their assessments. So just get it out of your head that it's, it's fair or it's not fair or something like that. It's going to be a strictly transactional analysis. We're going to be looking at your policy against your CCNRs for what is and isn't covered. And as Demetrios is saying, we did do a lot of CCNR amendments to respond to the surging insurance prices that we've experienced in the past few years, only because gosh, there were a lot of fires in the recent history and the prices are going up and carriers are leaving California. And so it's been kind of expensive for some associations to keep maintaining those covenants that they have to ensure the entire project walls in. So we've done a lot of amendments to help reduce the scope of insurable responsibility for the association. But for everyone's understanding, don't try to be an insurance professional yourself. I mean, there are mysteries we're never going to understand sometimes, and you kind of just have to let the insurance carrier and the adjuster and your insurance professional and your attorney kind of work through your documents and work through your claims to get to a solution for what makes sense for that financial contribution. And, sometimes it's going to work out where everything's covered, and sometimes there's going to be a little bit of a gap there. So just going back to this whole make sure you get that FEMA claim in. Of course, everyone wants everyone to be covered, but it's possible that there may be line items that are not covered that you may have to self-insure for. But just work with the process, and everyone's trying to work towards the best outcome.
And I want to add to that quickly because I don't want it to get lost. Yes, we're encouraging the homeowners, the unit owners to file. But if you are on this call and you are a board member and your HOA was impacted, we are encouraging you also to file an HOA claim with FEMA. Okay, so
yes,
we don't want that to get lost.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I want to piggyback off of something that Maria just touched on briefly. We have come off the heels of working with our associations this past year. Most of our associations are on a calendar fiscal year, and so we just finished that hard exercise of increasing dues because of the surge in insurance premiums that we saw. And this was well before the fires. So, I think that the question that's on everybody's mind here is what impacts do we expect this to have on insurance premiums moving forward?
You want Maria to go or you want me to go?
I mean,
what my crystal ball says.
Who wants to be the bad guy here?
Yeah, no, let me take it first and I'll hand it off. So let's take a step back and let's look at 2020 and 2021. That's where we in the industry started to see a shift in the overall insurance market from what was predominantly known as a soft market trending towards a hard market. And these are just insurance terms for prices are going to go up. And we started to see what was normally a 3 to 5 to 8% increase. They were moving in blocks of 15%, 20%. Now, the reason you've seen this dramatic shift in 2024 from carriers statewide, right? I can't think of a month that, depending on where you get your news from, there wasn't an announcement about what State Farm was doing, that Nationwide was on a freeze, that Farmers was on a freeze. Like, it seemed like every month a different carrier was either non-renewing or freezing. What that is they looked back at their performance in 2022 and 2023, and collectively, the top 25 brand names in the United States lost 60 billion. Most people don't realize that in April of 2024, the largest U.S. insurer, State Farm, was downgraded by AM Best to a B. That's because, from a performance standpoint, they were running at a 1.23, which means for every dollar they were taking in, they were paying out $1.23. Okay. So all of these changes you've seen from the State Farms, the Travelers, the Nationwides, they're adjusting their underwriting appetite to streamline it, to get off as much what they deem to be very risky business. And therefore, there's this gluttony of demand in the marketplace for older, non-sprinklered, frame, ill-kept, not well-funded, and there's a ton of it out there that nobody's sitting there waiting to catch. Okay, so that's what expedited this. Not just 20%. We had accounts go 5x, 10x. Used to spending 80, now they're spending 700,000. Used to spending 165, now spending $1 million. Okay, so to Maria's point, in my conversations with the C-level of the insurance companies that we work with, we're an independent, so we work directly with, I don't even know what the number is, but everyone was trending towards there may be an opportunity for some daylight in 2017. Now, I mean, 2027. Now, why were they targeting 2027? Because by 2027, the insurance companies would be able to look back at their performance in 25 and 26 and see if all of these underwriting adjustments and appetite changes had moved the needle and begun to make them profitable again. Okay. Right now, and I believe it was one of our panelists last night, he said LA Times put out an article that states that the losses could be somewhere near 120 billion. Now, here's what we
structures.
Yeah. Well, here's what we don't know. Oh, that's just the pure number of damage. That's not the insured number of damage. So we don't know, A, how many of that 120 was insured. B, what's the pie slices? How much did Travelers have? How much did Nationwide have? How much did Farmers have? How much did State Farm have? How much did Progressive have? Right. And we'll get that data, but it's not going to be for a while. And so all I can say is this event definitely, I think, puts us in a giant step backwards. But what's more tragic is the loss of life, the loss of property, and the tailspin it's put many people in. So it's not like I have any empathy for the insurance world, but just putting it plainly, I think it puts us in a giant step backwards because of the loss. Maria?
Well, I think it's very difficult for us to manage the situation because it's already so difficult to manage, a one-off casualty event for an individual unit. But like when you're dealing project wide, you're going to need a bigger team than your normal team. Yeah, your lawyer is going to help you parse through your administrative requirements to get yourself on track. But you are really going to have to lean on every single person that works for you, especially your community manager, who may have to get a special projects task force, because we are talking about everyone experiencing a very horrible event that is a direct impact to their personal home. And of course, it's a terrible thing, but also it's going to be very complicated to document and identify each and every single member's impact, and then also fulfill all of our ongoing requirements under the CCNRs. So I think with that being said, I mean, what really needs to happen is something that Russell was saying earlier, which is like, you really have to get on top of what your timeline is and who your players are early on. Get that team together, because you're going to have to fulfill your legal requirements. You're going to have to know the scope of damage and the cost of repair. You're going to have to put your claims in. You're going to have to know who your players are. You're going to have to do community outreach, because yeah, everybody's going to need some information and need some guidance, and we're all going to have to move together to get it done. And so, it's something that we're sharing with you. We don't want you to feel overwhelmed, but if you have any kind of takeaway from today's panel, it's that you really lean on your resources and not just kind of wait for something to be communicated with you.
Thank you. We keep hearing that California, I mean, carriers are leaving California, and that, they don't want to be in this market. We've had associations who've received non-renewals from State Farm, last year, and especially State Farm, but other carriers as well, who don't want to work with homeowners associations or don't want to be in California. Can people expect to receive cancellation notices in the coming months? And what are we expecting in terms of carriers who will stay in California or won't?
So let me take this a few different ways. First and foremost, let's talk about what the current insurance companies that operate in the state are all seeking. They are all seeking to write anything built within the last 25 years, anything that's fully sprinklered, and anything that clearly comes along with modern code and modern construction materials. Okay, so that is the most desirable. And if you reside in any one of those community types, you should be okay, because everybody is stammering over themselves to get that piece of the pie. If you are a community that is 25 years or older, is frame and non-sprinklered, you are in a real tough spot. You're in a tough spot because you are not very desirable to the insurance world. And so it's going to take an extra effort from the board to make sure that you're utilizing your reserve study, that you're very funded well, that you are executing your repair and replacement. Your roofs are good. Your driveways are good. Your signing, your painting, your sidewalks, your fuel mod cutbacks. Like, they're part of the application process is we have to provide the insurance underwriters that current budget and reserve study. They want to see the financial viability, because if you aren't financially viable, and from their drones and aerial, they can see that your roofs look like they should have been replaced 4 years ago, they have no interest in getting on your risk. And then if you're outside of that circle, let's say built in the 60s or later, you really have to produce proof of your upgrades. And the reason it's not hard to get, it's hard to try to trick the insurance company is they pay for third-party services, and when they click a button, they get like a 40-page report, and a section of that report is pulled from the database showing every permit ever pulled on that association. So they can see when you re-roofed. They can see when you changed your electrical panels. They can see when you repiped all your water. And if you say you did and it doesn't line up to that report, red flag, right? So with this occurrence that's happened, especially since it was a wildfire, I think that what you're going to continue to see is the these carriers sticking to this new underwriting appetite. And what you're going to start to see is offers that are layered. So you may have, for the past 30 years, been used to one carrier, Farmers, State Farm, Travelers, Allstate, Nationwide. Well, they're no longer in the business. So you're going to see like 6 carriers. One carrier taking the first 5 million, another carrier taking 5 million X of the first 5 million to make 10, and so on and so forth. And that has become the prevalent vehicle to ensuring those outer bands that I described. We've done more layered product this year than in my entire 23-year career. And the trend is continuing that way. In terms of why has certain carriers either frozen writing new business, disseminated a tremendous amount of non-renewal, or left the state, it's because they're negotiating with our Department of Insurance. And our Department of Insurance is, to protect the people. And so they set parameters on how much an insurer can raise a rate in an annual year from period to period. And so there have been discussions where, and I won't mention companies, where they've come to the Department of Insurance and said, we want to stay in the state, but we need a rate increase greater than our agreement allows. The state hasn't bent, and so they're leaving. This tragedy might change that. I don't know. But just as Russell mentioned, the loosening of permits and reconstruction and redlining, this may loosen the DOI's opinion so that we can get what we call capacity. We can get capacity into the state for this deluge of demand for our product.
You talked about layering insurance and maybe having 5 or 6 carriers that each take a piece of the insurance pie, so to speak. And so this question is actually, I think, more specifically geared towards Maria. But when we look at the CC&Rs, and we talked about initially at the start of the webinar, the CC&Rs really outlining what the association is required to be responsible for or maintain in terms of insurance. As we layer it, there's potential for gaps in meeting those obligations. What does that look like if the association can't obtain the coverage that's specified in the CC&Rs? And I don't know if you know, Maria, but you're muted right now. So, all right, there you go.
I mean, to me, if you don't have insurance, then the default rule is to go to the other parts of your CC&Rs to see whose maintenance and repair obligations are. And if you don't get sufficient money from insurance or FEMA to uphold your repair and reconstruction obligation, then a simple way to say it is you guys are then self-insured. So if you don't have the money in your reserves, you don't have the money in your operating, that just means you're going to have to levy a special assessment. And it doesn't feel good, but it's going to have to happen because there's no escape hatch in your CC&Rs where they say, in case there's no insurance, you don't have to do it. That doesn't happen. So it's not great. Something that may help you avoid some of the administrative headache of having to go to a membership vote on some kinds of special assessments is in 2025, we had SB 900 get passed, which is if it is a repair or reconstruction that's being asked of you by a utility, then you don't have to go to a membership vote. You can levy a special assessment or a special emergency assessment to cover those costs. But that is a very specific type of repair that you have to make, and you do have to get something from one of the utilities saying they want you to do it. I don't think that would be hard to do, but that could at least, save you a little bit of time if you need to raise a little bit of money. Also, I think depending on what your circumstances are, some of what you may be experiencing could be considered an emergency where you could avoid a ballot. I don't like when board members ask me, can we just push this through as an emergency assessment because I didn't feel like it? But if you have a casualty event that was completely unanticipated, like a fire, I think that would be different. And you do have to check with your attorney on how to properly document it, because you do have to execute a board resolution that makes certain findings so that you have it in your permanent records that you levied this assessment on an emergency basis and it meets the qualifications under code. Because although you think that everybody is on the same page and that everybody would willingly pay a special assessment, I mean, we all come across those tricky personalities where, they disagree and they just won't do it. And you're going to have to collect it. And you want that kind of documentation to justify why you may have to lien someone's property or why you may have to undergo other types of collections activity so that you can raise the funds to do what you're supposed to do.
So I see, Maria, two paths that are potentially going to be discussed. One path is insurance premiums are going to go through the roof, and then boards are going to have discussions of saying, well, I don't want to insure to the maximum because I don't want to pay $600,000 for my premiums when we were paying $300,000, and our homeowners are not going to be able to afford that. And then another path, which Demetrius just talked about, which is the layering of insurance, because carriers don't want to assume that 100% of the risk, and not being able to find the coverage that is required and specified by the CCNRs. What does the liability look like for the board in each scenario? Like, one, if they choose or pursue not obtaining the insurance because they don't want to deal with the cost, or two, if they just can't get the coverage because it doesn't exist to full capacity, what's the board's liability there?
Well, in the first hypothetical that you pose, it's kind of scary because you knew what your responsibility was as a board member to do the thing that your CCNR said, and you are electing not to do it. And that to me screams breach of fiduciary duty. You do have, if as a board member, it's not a paid gig, but you do have to decide things according to your governing document. And if you're making an intentional decision not to do it, and someone accuses you of breaching your fiduciary duties and they prevail, then all of a sudden, as a board member, you're putting your own personal assets at stake because you are indemnified by the association, but as long as you're making regular decisions that are backed by the governing documents, it may not be perfect every time, but at least if it's justifiable by your governing documents, then you are protected, and the association and your D&O carrier is going to cover your decisions. However, if you are saying, I don't want to do that, and I know this is wrong, but I'm going to do it anyway, your carrier is not going to cover that if you're nailed with, responsibility. The association is not going to cover whatever those, liabilities and exposures are. And so it's a real dangerous position as a board member to take that path. However, if you're in the second bucket where, hey, we're doing everything possible and there's just no insurance out there, I think that would be defensible because you're not making the decision to not fulfill your responsibilities under your documents. You're just taking you're doing whatever you can, but no one's giving it to you. I have helped some boards that are distressed in that way, where we work on an amendment to the CCNRs and actually receives a very wide support among the membership, where You just add some language in that provision of the document where it says, to the extent that the board can't get 100% insurable, they'll get as close as possible or something like that. And it doesn't have to be an overly complicated amendment to your CCNRs. But I think the membership is generally appreciative when you explain to them what that situation is and what that exposure to them looks like, because usually with that kind of membership vote, what will happen is the board will work with their insurance adjuster on what that special assessment risk may look like in terms of a gap. And when people see that it's a schedule of like 20, 30, $50,000 per unit per lot, whatever, all of a sudden they're very motivated to vote for this amendment.
Right.
Just to kind of jump in, we've seen this a lot over the past 3 years, and this has to do with something called brush scores. These independent companies put out scores ranging from 0 to 100, with 100 being the worst. And we've got a lot of associations that are in brush score areas north of 80. Okay. And their valuations are north collectively of all their buildings of 60 all the way up to $150 million. And because of their brush score, we cannot get enough carriers to line up to equal to that amount. So what Maria is talking about is it's highly likely that the insuring agreement reads that the board has a responsibility to insure to 100% replacement value. And so we can't obtain that. So we work in conjunction with the board, with HOA council, so that they can make membership aware this was shopped extensively. Here are all of the declinations. Here are all of the carriers willing to assign a sublimit up to X, Y, or Z. And so we cover all of that in hopes that the board then not only is protected, but can prove they went above and beyond to try to secure and meet their fiduciary duty. And then on top of that, once that final number is created, where there's going to be a shortfall of 27,000 per unit, and in the event of a total loss, you should expect to be assessed 27,000. This is where an additional supplemental letter goes out stating, please work with the insurance professional of your choice to secure loss of use equal to or greater than this number. Okay, so it's and then to dovetail, the amendment's fantastic because so many boards are just paralyzed because they think they have to possibly do a complete rewrite to their governing documents, which isn't the case. And to Maria's point, the verbiage just basically tweaks it enough to say they'll do everything they can, but if they can't, we give them reason to buy what they can. And it's in lay terms, that's what it sounds like.
So last night, Russell, we talked a little bit about the fact that there's a lot of discussion out there about the toxicity in the air, the particles that are microscopic right now, and the concern that people have for health and safety. And again, for people whose homes were near fires but didn't get burnt down, what do you recommend? How do people check and make that determination on whether or not they need to take additional steps?
Yeah, it's a great question. The first thing that you should do is you should have a thorough inspection of the home performed by someone qualified. You can do an initial inspection, but some of the tips and tricks that I would give is to partner with a general contractor and to look in every nook and cranny and test everything. You're going to want to pull appliances out and look at the connections electrically and make sure that you didn't have any surges, that sparks, anything like that, that you can see the evidence of. Additionally, you're going to want to get an air clearance test. If you have concerns about the negative air being pulled into the building, you can use what's called an environmental contractor to do an air clearance. or a restoration contractor. And what it is they set up a sampling kit of the air inside of your unit or your home, and it runs for 24 hours, and they're able to produce the report 24 hours after that. And what that information will tell you is that if it is safe to move back into the home, typically it's about 500 to 1500, depending on the size of the home. But it's peace of mind from an air clearance standpoint. And then going back to the inspections, Demetrios and I talked about this last night. I wanted to remind everyone that when you are insured during a loss or damages incurred, if you don't find everything right away, rest assured that there is mechanisms in place for supplemental coverage to be issued. Demetrius, I want to pass it to you to kind of explain that in a little more detail.
Correct. And I'm going to wrap in something else that Netta brought up, because I'm looking at the time and we're moving rapidly. If you're currently in possession of a non-renewal notice, right, you are going to be non-renewed March 1st of 2025. All of these policies are written on an occurrence basis, which means that the carrier by law is required to honor the policy as long as it occurred in an active policy period. So if you're someone that needs to file a claim, but you're in possession of a non-renewal notice, don't fret. The carrier is responsible to honor because it occurred in an active policy period. Additionally, once a claim is established, tendered, the carrier accepts it, that a covered peril triggered the policy to go into effect. Even if you get several payments, but something avails itself later, it's nothing more than reopening that claim, getting an adjuster back out, because it's tied to that occurrence.
It's a great point. And if they received a cancellation notice after the fire, they can rest assured that if they were insured during the incident, that they are covered.
Absolutely. That carrier would be staring at the Department of Insurance coming down on them incredibly hard.
They have to give 60 days notice of cancellation,
yes,
correct?
Yes.
Let's talk about FEMA a little bit. How do people file a claim?
So a couple things, right? The easiest way is that link that we identified earlier. It's going to be the easiest way to file a claim. Possibly the second easiest way is calling the hotline. Okay. Now, along those lines, Netta, I do want to share something that's important. Okay. Can everyone see? I'm assuming everyone can see this.
Yeah.
If you have received a notice that states you are not approved for assistance, this does not mean you are denied. Okay. I can't explain to you right now the systemic mechanisms which the computer systems are using that possibly are generating these. This went out to rest assured to let people know that if you received this letter, this should not stop you from filing a claim, because there are a series of things that could have triggered this not approved for assistance. Okay. And what I'm going to come down here is when you see often a not approved decision may mean that you only need to send additional information or supporting documentation, right? And here's some of the samples: proof of coverage, settlement of your claim, proof of identity, occupancy, ownership, proof that the damaged property was the applicant's primary residence at the time of the disaster, right? So these are all just one of these things could trigger a not approved. So it should not stop you, as well as this letter goes on to tell you that you can appeal a FEMA decision, and this notice will be disseminated to you after the call. The only other thing I want to share, because I know we're getting close, is that the insurance commissioner, he declared that because there's going to be such a demand for insurance adjusters to be deployed, he authorized the use of non-licensed adjusters. Now, we don't want that to alarm anybody. All that means is that they could be coming in from Michigan, Colorado, Arizona. They're licensed to be adjusters in their state. They're just not licensed in our state. So one of the things I want to impress is that when you meet your adjuster, I would ask them, are you licensed in the state of California? Are you one of those people that have volunteered your time to come and assist? Are you from another state? The reason I say that is if they identify that they are from another state, you can see here on the first provision, the adjusters, they are to be under the direction, control, and or management of a qualified licensed adjuster. So I would quickly follow up with a second question. Can you give me the name and contact information of the licensed adjuster you're reporting to? Okay. Because again, an adjuster from Western Michigan, even though he's going to be using the same system that Russell can explain that they input, he still doesn't understand the Palisades. He or she still doesn't understand Altadena. So those are the two things I wanted to share.
So, when should people start the remediation and restoration process? We know we have some people who are still under evacuation orders. Should they start to tackle that now? Do they wait for their insurance adjuster or their carrier to, communicate back and accept responsibility? What do people do?
Russell.
Oh, sorry. Didn't know that one was for me. So yeah, for first step, get the claims going, get it tendered and accepted, and get the adjuster assigned to your property, and begin the process. Like I spoke on earlier, you want to be proactive with finding who's going to be your architect, who's going to be your contractor, what necessary steps are going to need to take place behind the scenes. We'll need to understand, has this area been approved to begin the process? Are there accessible roads? Have they got the infrastructure put back online for safety purposes? Once that's happened, you can begin the reconstruction process, which typically goes design, permit, build. Okay, and for timeline purposes, if you are a total loss, a typical 3,000 square foot home in California takes about 12 months to completely rebuild. When you're trying to support your case with insurance for the dollar figures, we touched on this last night. If we don't get to it today, please check out the other recording. But you're going to want to provide as much documentation as you can to help support your stance. This could be photos. This could be receipts. This could be a plethora of different ways that support that this entity was in the home or this level of finish was in the home. Anything that helps support your claim to get the proper dollar figures, you're going to want to start building that catalog of items that you can speak to. The other item that it's not really a construction thing, but it's important. Maybe Demetrius or Maria can talk about how personal policy for personal possessions kind of will run separate to the construction side of things.
Russell, you do me one more favor, because I thought it was a great point. Can you discuss how in other large scale situations, whether the state or FEMA contracts with companies that specialize in not only a home, but blocks and roads and
Yeah, what he's referring to is there's discussions right now that the government may intervene, at least on the demolition side, in the clearing of lots, especially in the total loss areas. What he's referring to is there's discussion right now that contractors may be hired by the government to do entire neighborhoods for speed purposes. and they'll deal with the allocation side behind the scenes. But they are putting their heads together to figure this out. The most recent point of reference that we have is the Napa fires, and they did take a similar approach where some areas of total loss were given government contractors who came in and went through it, and they worked directly with FEMA. So by the time that you're engaging your contractor and architect, you're dealing with a blank lot that's ready for construction.
Thank you, Russell. So in terms of the question about personal property, depending on whether you have an HO6 condo contents or you have your single family structure, there should be a separate line item for personal property. Maybe you added a jewelry floater. Maybe you added an expensive arts floater. You know, we understand that if you're in the category of a person that lost everything, the only thing that you possibly might have is your digital repository of photographs on your phone or in the cloud. What we want you to get thinking is think about or start reviewing all the photographs you took playfully at home with family members at holidays, because behind you will be that kitchen table or that leather sofa or that flat screen. And these are all acceptive measures to prove this was what was in your home. Because, you know, I'm not saying anyone on this call has any desire to do it, but, you know, they're going to be looking out for people who are looking to exploit this disaster, just like millions of people exploited the last global catastrophe. So anything you can do, and this is why I want to plant that seed, think of your digital photos and go back through the holidays that you had in your home and all those photographs you took, and begin creating some sort of catalog, maybe in conjunction with a spreadsheet. But if you had a home policy or a condo contents policy, you should have also had a line item for personal property.
I just want to throw in one last comment, Netta, real quick.
Yeah.
There's always a concern, as Demetrios pointed out, that price gouging from contractors is always a threat. Newsom put out last night, they didn't give the clear parameters of what this is looking like, but they've made a consideration, some sort of protection that's going to be in place to help prevent that from happening. Just in the Bay Area where I'm at right now, we're already hearing that lumber prices are going to go up. They unfortunately do, you know, play the game with this side of things. My encouragement of how do I protect myself from price gouging as I'm going through this, I would check references. I would get multiple bids and really take the time of who you're going to go to the dance with for your reconstruction project, because it is an important decision. You're going to be married to them for, most likely, if you're a total loss, greater than a year. And if you're a reconstruction, you know, it'll at least be a few months. So take the time while this is all shaking out, utilize this time to begin being proactive with vetting contractors, vetting the scopes of work, getting your architect in place so that you can be ready to go when the orders are ready.
Thank you for that. This is a question that we had last night and it came up again today. And so for people who've been evacuated and not been in their homes or in their communities for an extended period of time, Maria, and also for people who've experienced a total loss with the fire or a partial loss and cannot be there at this point in time, do people still have to pay their HOA dues?
This is an easy answer. Just yes, period. I'm sorry, guys. There's no right of offset for any reason. Even if you have a total loss, you still have an obligation to pay your HOA assessments, but you know, similarly, you have the obligation to pay your property taxes. So, you know, I'm sorry, there's just no stay on those bills.
Russell, do you want to share about property taxes?
Yeah, if you have experienced significant damage or total loss, you should go down to the county assessor's office and apply for a revaluation. What this is referring to is your property taxes are based on an appraised value of the home. And if there is significant damage or no longer an existing home, it should be reflected in what you pay for that. So during Napa fires, we saw a lot of people going to the assessor's office and getting reallocated the proper amount of money of what they should be responsible for from a property tax standpoint. Now, after it's rebuilt, it can be adjusted, but for now, that is a easy grab. Maria, the other thing that we might want to talk about really quickly is existing contracts for like a landscaper or a painter or an in progress construction project, and how they should navigate either the termination of those contracts or what needs to happen there.
Are you talking about the force majeure provision on contracts? So I always think this is, I mean, it's not funny, but if you are a transactional attorney that doesn't have a lot of excitement in your life, this is the part of the contract where you can get real creative, because the force majeure provision is where you can identify, just these unusual casualty events that may excuse those who are bound in contract from having to perform. They will identify things like war, hurricane, fire, all sorts of stuff. But, if you are, a really bored transactional attorney, you might say like a stampede of elephants running through, but it's not limited to those events. But yes, that is a good note where you could investigate, getting a little bit of financial relief if you are excused from performance, because if you're a landscaper, gosh, there's nothing to landscape right now. So guys, force majeure.
Yeah. And I think from a management perspective, if there's anything that you can pause during this time, or if you have to work with legal counsel to insist on pausing and using those provisions in the contract, hopefully vendors will be reasonable and will just simply say, okay, we'll pause. But I think in that case, boards can look to modify their budgets. So after they have worked that out and negotiated and figured, if there's decreased operational costs for a period of time, they may put out a revised budget. But, I don't know if it's worth doing that. You may just want to collect, because at the end of the day, you're going to have a lot of expenses ahead if you've been affected to that degree. All right. So I'm going to actually before there's one last question that I just wanted to put out there before we jump into the full Q&A from our attendees here. Are there any other changes, laws, or concessions that have been made by our state or local government that we should know about?
From a construction standpoint, Newsom's executive order yesterday said that he challenged the building departments to ease upgrades that are not considered necessary. We would probably say that we'll see the seismic upgrades being required. We may see the Title 24, which is the energy efficiency, be required. We may see some changes to some building material requirements, which is where they'll want a more robust system that can withstand fires a little bit better. It's still a moving target. This is a living, breathing thing. It's going to continue to adjust. And my recommendation from the construction standpoint is just continue to try to stay educated and partner with someone who's staying on top of it.
Maria, anything else from your perspective that you've seen?
I mean, the most powerful thing that I have seen is just the one that came down over the weekend, the one where Governor Newsom relaxed the Coastal Commission's regulatory powers over reconstruction. Because if you are in a coastal zone, it's a lot more than just having to get permits. I mean, that department of the government is, very onerous to have to deal with, and they're empowered to bury you in
They
red
have a lot
tape.
of power.
Yeah, they have a lot of power. I mean, we could tell you stories on and on and on and on, but that's definitely like the most powerful thing that has come down in response. But as far as the other types of local government responses, it's gonna go depending on where you are because they all have their more local jurisdictional requirements. I am seeing some municipalities relax some, but Newsom is really inviting everyone to pull together, and we really hope that some of these local municipalities take that to heart.
Yes.
And then Demetrius, there was something with the insurance commissioner, right? Did they came out and said that no changes could be made on policies for the next year or something along those lines? Or did I?
No,
Okay,
they encouraged carriers not to drop.
got it. Okay. There's a question from one of the attendees here. Russell, does the executive order only apply to the affected areas on the building permits, or is this a statewide thing now?
That's a great question. I'll need to look into that a little bit more. My understanding is it's directly related to the impacted areas.
Okay. Um, we have another question from Rachel Burke. She says, our HOA lost 3 of 5 buildings. Our insurance, which was Fair Plan, insured each structure individually. Any claim and replacement would thus be treated per to individual building, correct? I.e., any cost to rebuild a structure and individual homes there and beyond insurance payout is on those residences and addresses that were effective. Can you confirm?
Well, if the policy was with the fair plan and the policy indicates a value per building, I would assume that that amount of coverage is only available up to that limit. I don't know if the limit's adequate. But yes, she should have comfort that if there are specified limits per building, that should be available up to that limit. And I'm not sure, she should engage the agent as well.
Okay. Then we have another question from Helga. For the 8 units in Vista Del Mar that are still standing, is there a way to get security? We have seen breaches, and this is in the Palisades, just for context, and this is an area which is still an evacuation zone. We've seen a lot of things on the news related to looters going into these territories, and despite, all of the efforts of our local law enforcement, people are still getting there. So should they get security? Can they get security? What do you all think?
That's
Yeah,
so
I mean,
sad, by the way. That's so sad, but I mean, if you guys are in an evacuation zone, I mean, it would be hard for you to get any kind of security in there because nobody's supposed to be there.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And what's the curfew? Right, there's a curfew as well.
yeah, it's a state of emergency.
No, but is it 9 p.m.? Like when does the curfew start, Netta? Do you know?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly what time. I mean, but these people are going in at all times. My sister,
Right.
and see,
There,
Yeah.
there are third-party security companies, Firewatch companies that you can hire. I thought I just had a quote for it recently. It was expensive, but it was about $100,000 for 24-hour security
Yeah, it's
for
not
a
cheap.
50-unit complex for 1 year.
um, okay. So Helga also asked about property taxes and guidance. So I think that was a good tip, Russell, where you shared going down to the county assessor's office and asking for kind of a reassessment there.
Absolutely.
So Debbie asks, what happens if you have not been able to go back to your home, given it is still blocked off to assess what the total loss is? What do you recommend on doing with your insurance or your GC?
If they have access to either their agent or they know their policy and their carrier, I would open a claim And in opening the claim, I would express, I don't know if my home is still standing. It's in a devastated area. I've been unable to get up there, but I want to open the claim. Because once you do garner access, you've removed that step. And on top of that, I'm not sure that there's an active carrier in the state that doesn't realize this is probably either fire damage or fire related damage. So I don't think they'll be surprised by you wanting to open the claim.
And for the people that are completely closed off, we've heard that drones and satellite imaging are being used, especially if you're in a known total loss area. They are trying to expedite this. So we've seen USAA turn some claims around pretty quickly through the use of satellite imaging and drones. So there is technology to still try to move this along without having a physical body there to say, yeah, there's nothing here.
Helga had asked a question, which I can, quickly answer here. She asked, or she said, pressure washing is for outside. Is that something the HOA insurance covers? I mean, from an insurance standpoint, I think the deductible in most cases is probably higher. If it's just a pressure washing that's needed, I don't think, you'd file a claim for just pressure washing. But if it is all encompassing and part of the scope that is put together by the adjuster, then it should be covered. And then of course it also depends on the type of building and your CCNR. So in the cases of single family homes, your lot is the individual owner's responsibility. So the building exterior is typically the individual owner's responsibility. But when we're looking at condos and townhouses, that's different. It's usually the HOA's responsibility there. So I think it really just depends on what we're a case by case basis here. Okay, somebody asked about dues needing to be paid. We answered that.
And please make sure you do the roofs too when you're pressure washing, not just the vertical walls.
Can you tell us why?
Well, it's a lot of the landing spot for a lot of the airborne debris. If it is going to rest and land on the building, it's going to be on the roof, and you'll get the microparticles on the vertical walls. But think of it as everything needs to be done. It should be a couple $100 a unit. And please don't try to do it yourself. There's special respiratory equipment that is needed for cleanup like this. It's not get out your ladder and just do it yourself. Please use a professional.
Communities behind the fire line, but most likely affected by soot, smoke, etc. Is it best to file with FEMA too?
In everything we're discussing, in every situation, file with your primary carrier and file a claim with FEMA.
Yes.
There's no detach.
Is Farmers insuring HOAs now, or did they pull out of California like State Farm is?
No, they're still in the marketplace. They just did, my understanding, because you have to understand, if you're a farmer's agent, you were known as a captive agent, right? You flew that one flag. I'm an independent, but my understanding is they're still in the market. They are one of those carriers that change their underwriting appetite. So that's the reason you've seen them get off of a lot of risks that they no longer want to be on.
Okay. We have a question here. This is a tough one. Our insurance for HOA did not renew because the carrier is pulling out of that market in California, and we are now uninsured. We had a quote last week, which was immediately pulled, and we can't find the policy. What do you recommend?
Well, if they should engage the agent they were working with to keep monitor as to when and if the carrier or layered carriers they had been offered potentially will look to unfreeze the ability to write new business, right? And I don't believe you will see that until it is public knowledge that these fires are 100% contained. So it could be weeks. And really there's nothing they can do but stay in active contact with their agent or broker, he or she, to find out when this carrier and or other carriers are going to lift their freeze on writing business in that designated area.
Next question is, given that our building has not sustained any damage, but residents have been evacuated for several days, we want to understand who will be responsible for covering the loss of use during this period. Should homeowners expect to file individual claims through their personal insurance policies, or will the HOA be providing any assistance for coverage for these losses?
So if I'm go ahead.
Oh, well, I was going to say if there hasn't been a determination or if the association's carrier is not going to jump in, then and the homeowner's insurance is not going to jump in, then the default rule would be that the association doesn't cover loss of use for relocation. So, I wouldn't be homeless during this time, but I also wouldn't have any high expectation that the association is going to use its assessment money to pay to put everybody in a hotel.
I would echo that, and just slightly differently, in that the HOA's insurance rarely, if ever, gets involved with loss of use. That is a requirement of the unit owner, that should their exclusive use airspace be uninhabitable, that's why on their HO6 policy, there is a designated line item for loss of use, right? So if they have a condo contents policy, they should have already opened a claim and expressed that they need to access their loss of use.
Thank you. Larry clarified that the curfews are 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., so thank you for that. Rachel asks, should we be filing claims under our umbrella policy?
Well, a couple things there. An umbrella policy is excess to the underlying general liability, as well as if it is an umbrella policy written for our industry, they typically can also be excess to the underlying directors and officers policy, and they can be excess to the workers' comp policy, payrolled or non-payrolled. So in this case, none of those three categories are coverages for first-party property. The only policy portion that covers first-party property is the property section. The umbrella is only going to come into play if the underlying general liability limits are exhausted, and that's obviously for bodily injury and property damage to a third party. So it's highly unlikely that anyone's umbrella policy will come into play here.
Debbie asks, if you do not plan on rebuilding, what do you need to do with your insurance, if anything?
Obviously, I can only assume based on that question, Debbie is a single family structure. I don't think she could speak for a multi-unit. If she doesn't need insurance moving forward, I would assume she would cancel it.
Okay. And I guess that's a good question for HOAs. Can they decide not to rebuild? What would that entail?
That would be a membership vote. They would all, but the voting requirements are very high to not rebuild. I've seen them in governing documents, and if you're going to vote no, the threshold is at least a super majority and above.
I've seen 100% in some. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we have an anonymous question here. What is the best percentage estimate to use for insurance increase for renewals within the next 60 days?
It's a real sliding scale. It really depends on, here's all I can tell you. Do you know your brush score? If your brush score is under 50 and you've been built within the past 25 years and your community is fully sprinklered, you have a very good shot of keeping your insurance at the levels you become accustomed to. Any one of those parameters I just described, you're a brush score greater than 50, you're not sprinklered, you're constructed older than 25 years ago, I have no idea right now. No idea.
And I mean, in the last year, we saw insurance premiums increase
10x,
by
five, yeah,
10x,
yeah.
5x, so you said something last night, Demetrius, you explained something about people in California who think that their premiums are higher. And you talked about the fact that you work with so many different states, and you just kind of put it into perspective for us. And I wanted to ask you to touch on that real quick.
So again, I'm very fortunate to operate as far east as Kansas City, Missouri. So you can imagine the age of those buildings. So in states like it, I'll have this question with a lot of California boards. I'll say, let me ask you a question. If you had a $10 million structure in downtown LA, a $10 million structure in Colorado, and a $10 million structure in Kansas City, Missouri, who do you think's paying the most for their insurance? And typically 7 or 8 out of 10 say, oh, it has to be Los Angeles. Well, actually, it's Los Angeles would have been the cheapest rate because carriers typically priced on the perils that were possible to happen. And California, for the longest time, has been known as a fire water state. But there's hail, there's high winds. So in these other states, the possibility of loss to hail is huge. The possibility of convective storms and high winds is huge. So they've already been paying 4 to 5 times more than we've been paying in California for my entire 20 plus year career. So what's happened is I think the carriers have said, oh, all right, yeah, sure. A majority of the claims emanating out of California are fire and water, but we can really no longer treat them and price them as a two peril state. They need to be in lockstep with the way we price the rest of the country. So, and to put that into perspective, pre 2021, you could have gotten a policy that covers $10 million in California for $10,000. That same policy in Colorado would have been 35,000, and that policy in Kansas City would have been 40,000. Now you're seeing that policy in California, again, dependent upon age, construction, sprinklered, location, proximity to high brush, etc. That could range anywhere from 20,000 to 200,000, right? We had a community that had a value of 100 million. They were used to paying 165,000 a year for $100 million of coverage. In 2022, they paid $1 million. In 2023, they paid $1 million. And this year, pre this wildfire, we got their rate down to 800,000, 825,000. So we had started to see some daylight. And I expressed to this board the days of them ever returning to that number was non-existent. And that by 2027, whatever that number fell to, that might become the new norm for California. But again, this wildfire changes things. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah. All right, this is the last question that we have time to take. We have a question here. Our HOA dictates 75% vote to rebuild if insurance money doesn't cover 85% of the cost of replacement. What about dissolution or restructure of an HOA if some homes or structures remain? Any experience or insight on that?
Well, I can't tell you about cost of reconstruction, but I can tell you what your requirements are if you want to form a whole new HOA or if you want to completely terminate or disband your HOA. If you want to stop being an HOA, you're going to need 100% approval. If you want to restructure your association, then it just depends on what your amendment approval requirements are. And it really depends on what categories you're trying to amend in your existing CCNRs to know what those voting requirements are.
Okay, well, I want to thank our panel, Russell, Demetrius, and Maria. I want to thank you so much. I know you all have a lot on your plate with all that your clients are coming to you with right now. And so thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be here and to help support the participants on this webinar. And thank you all for joining us today. We just want to really extend our knowledge and whatever we can do to help those who've been impacted. Clearly, we had quite a few on this call or on this webinar today. So thank you all, and I'll let you guys, panelists, say any final words as well before we log off for the day.
Maria,
My
would you like to start?
Sorry, Russell, didn't catch what she said.
I was just saying my heartfelt condolences. It's going to be a process. Try not to put it in a box in your head on what the timeline's going to be, because most likely it'll just frustrate you. But just continue to chip away at it, build a roadmap, and do your best to follow it.
My concluding remarks are that it's going to be okay. You have a great team. You have experienced people here to help you. And this is definitely an unprecedented fire that we are dealing with in our most recent timeline, but it's certainly not an event that we're not prepared for and that we have no blueprint on how to respond to.
I would just reiterate, file your claims with your primary insurer. And if you were unaware of that FEMA link that we discussed earlier, as soon as you receive this information from HOA organizers, click that link and file your claim.
Stay up to date on the updates.
Yeah. Oh, and final words. We are going to try to put this on again in a few weeks. So for those of you in attendance, we want to continue to bring new information as it becomes available. So stay tuned. We'll be in touch and communicate with you when we do have a subsequent date established so that we can share some more news and updates and all these little changes in the law and concessions that are being made, especially. So we'll have some more as things unfold in the coming weeks. All right. Thank you all. Have a wonderful
Thank you.
afternoon and
Thank you.
evening ahead.
You. Take care.